wilderness to tell us how to handle something that's never happened before. We're doing our best to come up with a vision for something absolutely unprecedented. It's 27 days into this shutdown, and it is absolutely a manufactured crisis. Everyone knows this is a man-made crisis made by one man in particular. 27 days into this shutdown, but the danger is 44 days away. So the clock is ticking. In 44 days, on March 1st, at that point, at least 2 million New Yorkers will be directly and personally negatively affected by the shutdown. And the people of New York City will, starting on March 1st, lose $500 million in direct federal support every month. We throw around a lot of big numbers around here, but this one is astounding, and it should not be for a moment passed by. It has to be dwelled on. We will lose $500 million in direct support for New Yorkers every month starting on March 1st. This, for 1.6 million New Yorkers, will come in the form of a loss of the support they receive so they can get food for their families, so children can have nutritious food, so seniors can have enough to eat. The food stamp program, also known as SNAP, serves 1.6 million New Yorkers. The average family gets $230 a month. For most families that receive this support, that $230 is irreplaceable. An example that a family of three, typical family of three under this initiative receives about $5,000 a year in support so they can buy food. Take a typical family that gets this support, that is making, for example, $27,000 a year, and take $5,000 of their income away. And you can do the math and understand what that's going to do to their household. And we are again talking about all of this playing out because of a crisis that never had to happen in the richest country on earth. We're literally watching as our federal government starts to starve its people. That is one of the biggest elements of the $500 million a month that we will lose, but there's other crucial elements as well. Federal money pays for school breakfasts and lunches for our kids. That will be gone. It pays for rent support to keep low-income people in their homes. That will be gone. It helps to keep the lights on at NYCHA, which is already dealing with so many challenges. Our public housing will immediately be hurt if federal support is suspended. What I also need to emphasize to everyone is it gets worse each month. This is not a crisis that hits and then just levels off. In fact, it starts to cascade. For two reasons. The human impact gets worse each month. People's budgets get drained, the possibility of evictions from their homes, the quality of life in their neighborhoods and their housing developments will decline with each month. But it's also because the state of New York will have to start cutting off support, because as it loses federal dollars, it cannot turn around those dollars and help localities. So we're going to be hit by two different problems, and each month they will get worse. Of course, our mission is to try in any way we can to lessen the blow. But at the kind of level we're talking about here, even the resources of a city as big as New York City will be quickly exhausted. Literally, in the course of a few months, we would run out of any money that we have to address this crisis. Now, I want to make sure that people understand who are on the firing line here, the people going to be immediately affected. To assume the worst, we have to prepare them for that. Again, we'll do everything in our power to help people, but I want to make sure that folks who receive food stamps, who receive support through the SNAP program, understand that they, at this moment, will no longer get any checks starting March 1st. In fact, some recipients have gotten a double check or are in the process of getting a double check, which will cover the months of January and February. For any food stamp recipients who think they've gotten an unusually large check, that is because that is the last check you will see until the shutdown is over. So people who have gotten those larger checks, those double checks, have to shepherd their resources as best they can. They have to recognize that they have to stretch that money in any way they can. Of course, we'll do everything we can with our food pantries and any other support we have to help people get the food they need. But there is literally no way to replace the impact of the food stamp program. Any New Yorkers who are suffering already because of the shutdown or who will begin to suffer directly, whether that means they're suffering financially, whether that means they need help to get by each day, whether it means they're dealing with emotional distress, they should turn to the City of New York. We will do all that we have within our means. If you need help finding food, if you need mental health counseling, if you need help dealing with a landlord or a bank in terms of your mortgage, we've set up a website particularly for folks who are being victimized by this shutdown, nyc.gov/federal shutdown. That will be the one stop for all help that people need, and we will do our best to get it to them. The best solution is obviously to stop this shutdown. We're working closely with Senator Schumer and with Speaker Pelosi and all of our members of Congress to address this crisis. I want to say something on behalf of 8.6 million New Yorkers to the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Leader McConnell, you do not need a permission slip from the President to end this shutdown. You have the power to reopen this government and ensure that millions and millions of Americans don't suffer any further. And of course, I have to give a message to a New Yorker who at this moment is creating horrible pain for the people of his hometown. President Trump, you shut down the government over a fake crisis at the border, but now you are causing a real humanitarian crisis in New York City and in cities and towns all over the United States of America. This has to end. A president is supposed to protect us. You're making it worse. You have to end this. So, it is a dire situation. There is no other way to say it. And it will overwhelm us quickly if it is not addressed soon. I want to say a few words in Spanish, and then I'll turn to Commissioner Banks. El cierre del gobierno federal está a punto de tener un impacto terrible en casi 2 millones de neoyorquinos. El presidente Trump cerró el gobierno por una falsa crisis de seguridad en la frontera y ahora está creando una verdadera crisis humanitaria en su propia ciudad. La única solución es reabrir el gobierno federal de inmediato. With that, I want to turn to Commissioner Banks. He and Administrator Bonilla are going to be doing everything they can to help the food stamp recipients, the SNAP recipients. Again, these are the folks who are going to suffer the most and the most quickly. And going to work with food pantries, going to work with nonprofit organizations to do all we can. So I want to thank both of them for their leadership in this very difficult moment. Commissioner Banks.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just to amplify the Mayor's remarks about the impact on food stamps, the SNAP program, it's nearly 1.6 million New Yorkers, but who are those New Yorkers? 535,000 of those New Yorkers are children under the age of 18. 425,000 of those New Yorkers are seniors. Now, the mayor spoke about early benefits and people beginning to receive February benefits. I want to explain that and explain the mechanism for that, and then conclude these comments. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture advised the states that it had sufficient funds to authorize so-called early payment of benefits, that is, the payment of February benefits during the month of January, that the U.S. Department of Agriculture said would be available as long as these benefits were paid out before January 20th, which is approximately 30 days from when the shutdown began. And so New York City, the Department of Social Services worked closely with the State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance to process as much of the caseload as could be processed in order to provide for early benefits. What that means is there are people all throughout the month who come in, and they have the absolute right to come in at any time during the month. We're able to process about 94% of the caseload, and that means that we believe that all of the people who would be due benefits in February will either get them as an early benefit beginning today or at their regularly scheduled time. And that's a real tribute, I think, to the frontline workers at the Human Resources Administration who worked literally night and day to accomplish this. What that means, however, I think the mayor highlighted this, and I want to highlight this and ask that you spread the word, and we will be spreading the word through communications directly with clients. That means clients will be getting their February benefits, many clients will be getting their February benefits during the month of January. And we are communicating to clients that this is essentially 2 months of benefits being provided now, and that for many clients there will not be additional food stamps coming in the month of February. This is the payment for both January and February, that they will have already received January and now February early. It is a complicated message for people living on the edge to receive this message from government, but the state and the city work together to take full use of the early payment option that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has given us to make sure that we could provide as much benefits as possible. But again, to amplify the mayor's message there, come March 1, there are no early benefit funds available because those are only available to be paid now, February benefits to be paid now, and then reserve funds will enable us to make sure that the rest of the people due benefits in February get them, but those do run out. And so March 1st is D-Day for New Yorkers receiving food stamps. And we're going to do everything we can to connect people to their benefits and to provide the supports that we can.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So all city agencies are preparing for this crisis to worsen. Obviously, I want to thank our budget director and everyone at OMB because they are at the front line of this effort to get ready. We will be making regular announcements as we have additional notifications of any measures that we can take. But we're starting this countdown clock now because there's a lot to do. And again, it is a painful reality to be telling people up front that we cannot possibly compensate for everything that's about to be lost. I think it's a time to be blunt with New Yorkers. We obviously will do everything in our power to help people, and we're going to ask the charitable community to do all it can. We're going to ask the business community to do all they can. I met with clergy leaders this morning. I asked them to prepare to help members of our congregations in every conceivable way, starting in all instances with food. But that reality of the loss of $500 million a month is just too staggering to miss. We will not be able to make people whole. We just won't. But we'll do everything in our power to help people, and we will provide constant updates. And anyone who's already feeling the effect, which is first and foremost the government employees who've been furloughed in New York City and the government contractor employees who have been furloughed in New York City, those individuals can reach out through the website, through 311 right now. For any help that they need, we will do our best to provide it. But this is just the calm before the storm. In just a few weeks' time, we're going to see something we've never seen before. So, as I think you know, we're going to do this press conference today in 3 segments. This first segment on the federal shutdown. So let's take questions on this topic. Marcia.
Mr. Mayor, I know my first question is this. You have, will the federal government, once the shutdown ends, reimburse the city for any monies that you might have to lay out to make people whole? And if that's the...
Let me stay on that one second, just give you the top line, because it is not in every case, but maybe in some. So let's have our Budget Director, Melanie Hartzog, speak to that.
Sure, I think it's important, as the mayor said, on that $500 million per month, that of that amount, about $100 million, a little over 100, flows through our budget, and that's largely for school food and rental assistance provided through Housing Preservation Development. For that portion, we are trying to work through whether or not, if in fact we were able to provide that and continue to provide that, would that be reimbursed? But the balance of the funding, the large portion being SNAP that does not flow through our budget, there is no mechanism for us to be able to do that.
I also, let me clarify. We're in such uncharted territory, Marcia, we don't even know if we would be reimbursed because the rules of the game are now so broken. If we were talking about normal times, we would have a clear sense, to Melanie's point, of which things are reimbursable and when you get reimbursed versus the things that are not reimbursable. And clearly, some of the things we would try and do to help people would not be reimbursable, but at least we could depend on the areas that we could be reimbursed. I need you to understand that, 1, we don't know when this shutdown ends. So first, we don't know, even if we thought we would be reimbursed, when that would ever be. 2, we don't know how much we would be reimbursed because the rules of the game have shifted so radically. 3, there are scenarios where we never get reimbursed. Again, because we have seen extraordinarily arbitrary things happening in Washington, and we have to recognize that any dollar we put out, we may never see again. And we have to protect New York City with that knowledge. So, are there some areas where we may be able to get reimbursed? We hope so, but we can't bank on it.
The second part of my question was, I know that the city budget has a rainy day fund of sorts, and I wondered if it would be possible to tap any of those rainy day funds to try to help people if they don't have any food.
Obviously, we need to protect our people, and particularly, we have to make sure people have enough to eat, and that's why we're already preparing to reinforce our food pantries, for example. But I want to caution about the sheer magnitude. At the rate of loss we would sustain, at that rate of $500 million a month, we would exhaust all of our reserves in a matter of months. And then New York City would be in a very perilous situation of our own. A lot of people know that once, not so long ago, this city came very close to the edge. We can never let that happen again. We have to serve our people. We will serve our people, but at this rate, we would exhaust all available funds in short order. Juliet.
New Yorkers are pretty resourceful. Are there suggestions that you're making on how they can manage their resources in the meantime?
Look, I think they are very resourceful and resilient. I think New Yorkers will help each other. I think families will help their family members. I think houses of worship will help their congregants. Businesses will help their employees. I believe all that's going to happen. We always step up for each other. Look, we're going to try and do things, for example, like convince banks to not foreclose on mortgages of people affected by this. We're going to try and convince landlords to not evict people. Where we can provide targeted help, we'll do it. But again, there's no way we could make up for the full dollar figures involved here. I think people are going to do their damnedest to get through this. But Juliet, if we were talking about, I know it's only going to be a month, we would know what to do. We have to look in the face of the possibility this could go on for months and months. This could go on for the whole year because we're dealing with a president like one we've never seen before. We're dealing with a stalemate like we've never seen before. We're dealing with a level of unpredictability that has no historical precedent. And so we have to be really careful, just like families are going to have to be careful. I think what families are going to recognize, and that's why we're sending a dire message to help families get ready. Save your money, prepare for the worst. If you're affected by this, you know, there's probably a lot of families that are not affected, but for at least 2 million New Yorkers, they will be directly affected. Get ready for some very tough times, and we'll do everything we can to help.
And you don't think you're scaring people?
It's time for people to, I think I'm warning people, and they need the warning, they deserve the warning. I wouldn't be doing it if I had not looked into the abyss here. I am seeing the impact. The briefings over the last few days, I've never heard anything like it in my life. The notion of losing $500 million in a month, I mean, there's nothing like that. And also, I think for a lot of us, we all assumed it would be over by now. I mean, this is a little bit like we're living history. I think a lot of us thought, well, there's a new house, and you know, maybe that would have broken the dam, but this could be a crisis that goes on and on. So I'm not trying to scare people because it's something I feel comfortable doing. I'm trying to be honest with people that we have to start bracing ourselves for a real crisis. Rich.
So, Mr. Mayor, given the price that you're outlining might take place here, the Democrats have taken what they believe to be a principled stand against against the president's wall. You know, in a $4.4 trillion budget, would it be worth it just to give in, let him have his $5 billion, let him build the wall and get it over with, given the bleak
No.
you outlined?
No, I'll tell you why. Because one, you know, that would be $5 billion that could help people in this city and in this country that would be going to waste and would be creating something very negative. That's not the solution. The solution is for the Congress to tell the president he has no choice. You know, the constitutional system gives the Congress a huge amount of power. And the Republicans in Congress have to now assert themselves and tell the president that this game has to end. And if they did that, he would fold. I fundamentally believe it. You've seen him back down many times and change his story. He has no shame, and we all know that by now. He could change his story tomorrow. He wouldn't care at all. But he doesn't feel enough pressure right now. Now, some Republicans, you know, there were, I think, 6 members of the House that voted for the most recent resolution. There's a couple of senators who have come out. There has to be more. That's the way to solve it. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Governor Cuomo was just on the Brian Blair show last hour where Brian asked him to quantify the economic impact of the shutdown at this 4-week point. And the governor's initial response was to say, first, tourism is impacted and cited the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island as tourist draws and how the state has kept them open. The tone was much less dire than what you're talking about. So my question is, are you having conversations with, you know, with him as well about how the city and state will work together? And, you know, it seems like the city is bracing for something so much more extreme. You know, just moments ago, he was talking about it in a much.
Yeah, I wouldn't overrate one interview. If you ask about the impact on the economy, that's a very different question than the impact on everyday people. I saw some reporting this morning that, you know, the shutdown is now potentially going to have an impact on the larger economy. It is potentially going to slow the rate of growth for the country. That's another thing I think that could actually jolt the president into action. But this is about what this shutdown is going to do to everyday New Yorkers. We're going to coordinate closely with the state, but we know the reality. The state is also going to be in crisis. The state's going to be losing a huge amount of federal money. This is, you know, I've talked to you guys at budget time about this cascading effect, that when there is a crisis, and normally we would have thought something like an economic downturn, it hits us twice. It hits us because of whatever we lose in revenue, but then we also know that the state loses revenue and therefore passes along less to New York City. There's no question that would happen here. We'll coordinate closely. I'm certainly going to be talking to the governor about it. I think it's all coming to us in waves in terms of both the sheer magnitude of the problem, the more of the analysis we get, But also, I think on January 3rd, we all thought we were probably days away from resolution. And I think for me, certainly in the last few days, I have gone from the assumption this would be solved soon to now actually thinking about what if it was not solved for the longer term. So I think it's all occurring to all of us more and more that we're dealing with something much, much bigger than we ever anticipated. And we'll work closely with the governor for sure. Yes?
On Section 8, what's going to happen in practical terms to the tenants who receive Section 8 vouchers when that funding runs out? Because they'll no longer be able to pay the rent. What's the practical impact on that?
We don't know is the answer. We've never seen anything like this before. It's very different whether it is a shutdown that goes to, for example, April versus a shutdown that goes to June or July or August or longer. I think if landlords perceive it to be a short-term reality, there'll be some stability. I think if landlords perceive it to be a longer-term reality, we're going to be in for some real trouble. We're going to try to prevail upon landlords to keep things the way they are, in the hopes that they can be made whole later. The same with banks. We're going to do our best to prevail upon banks to not move on any foreclosures that are related to the shutdown, to families that are losing resources because of the shutdown. I would like to believe that banks would be sensitive to that reality, but I can't tell you that yet. So we don't know. I think everything, if I had a core message to help everyone understand is it's very different if it happens for only a little time versus if it goes on for months and months. Each month gets worse.
Just to follow up on that, you recently announced your plan to shift 62,000 NYCHA apartments to Section 8 funding. Has this ordeal given you pause about that or second thoughts about that?
Not the idea. I mean, every day that HUD is shut down, it means those kind of initiatives are being delayed. But no, the underlying policy is absolutely the right policy.
Can you talk some more about the impacts on school food? You have April up there as the date, so what exactly would happen in April? And elsewhere in the country, districts are starting to pare back on what they're serving kids. Are there plans, kind of contingency plans for the meantime?
That planning is going on right now. I'll start, and if the chancellor or the budget director want to add, look, if you said, tell me what might be your #1 concern, it is food for children. That this crisis could literally mean that food was taken out of the mouths of children. So the #1 thing we're going to try to address is making sure our kids have the food they need. And in the school setting, at least we can do something about it. In terms of drawing on some of our reserves, that would be a priority. Where it gets a lot tougher is for those families that don't have food stamps, because we don't have a way to replace that. I know a lot of them will turn to food pantries. We'll do our damnedest to keep those food pantries stocked, but it's going to be a real challenging situation.